Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC, and I thought I would do a little tuning video on the Traxxas Maxx Slash. So if you haven't seen my full review of this truck, the main issue I had with it was that I felt like it just didn't drive all that well. And I'm talking about for a short course truck, not for any type of RC car, but compared to other short course trucks in its sort of 4S, 6S, 1/8 scale, 1/7 scale class, didn't drive all that well. So just wanted to talk about what I actually did to my personal truck to get to drive better, and wanted to share that information. So I'm kind of go through a bunch of steps, going from what I would do first up to probably the last thing. So if you don't want to do all these changes, that's fine. Second thing I would say is that there's no one magic pill for this truck. It is a series of little incremental changes that altogether make a difference, but doing one thing is not going to just magically transform this thing from a rather poor handling vehicle into something that is awesome. Just the more you do, the better it will get. So first thing I want to talk about is actually the body. There are some cutouts here at the top, 4 little rectangles to let a little bit of air escape, but I do recommend actually trimming it out even more. I tried to keep mine somewhat like normal looking. I didn't want all these weird cutouts, so I cut out basically these vents that were already there. I did do a big oval here over the Traxxas logo, and then I did basically ream out these holes here on the bottom. I didn't do the bottom 3, but these top 4 I did do. That way to kind of keep it still sort of normal looking, but allow some air to escape. Definitely recommend doing that. That'll be basically free as long as you got a Dremel or a hobby knife or a reamer or something like that. You can get that essentially for cheap. Second thing I would do is actually mess with the suspension. So on the front arms, I did add actually those little shock extenders that they do have on the back. I'll have links in the description below where you can pick these up. But yeah, there's, like I mentioned, many times, and I'm happy to hear people actually using the word droop, because droop is kind of critical to how a vehicle actually drives, and it just didn't have enough droop in the front. Basically not enough shock extension. So landing on the front end definitely, doesn't have enough travel, and you end up smacking the chassis a lot. Just even doing reasonably sized jumps like 5 feet, 8 feet high, it'll definitely smack the front end. So get those shock extenders. And then I did go with different springs. So in the front, I am actually running the white springs from the Sledge. They're a little bit longer, a little bit stiffer as well. So the front end definitely needs a little bit stiffer springs. I think that's a bigger deal than the rear end. And then shock oil weight, I'm actually running 60 weight up front, up from the 50 weight that the vehicle actually comes stock with. So 60 weight oil Sledge white springs I think are going to get you really close. You could always go up a little bit higher, a little bit lower, up to you, but that seems to work pretty well for me. On the rear end, I'm actually running the Max Blue springs that come on the Max V2. So these again are a little bit longer. There are 7 coils rather than 6, I believe, on the stock springs. Shock oil weight, actually I went up to what is it? 100 weight oil, which is like 1200 CST. So I'm running very thick shock oil in the rear. You could go down a little bit depending on where you set your rear shock. So I'm actually running it in the middle here, front and rear. You could actually go on the inner hole if you're doing humongous air, like if you're a Thunder RC or somebody like that, jumping this thing like 40 feet high. I would definitely go to the middle oil, and then I think you could run 80 weight oil or 1000 CST. But if you're running in that middle hole, that just allows you to drive a little bit better on the ground. That inner hole really just makes it like super long and just makes it roll a ton. So I'm going with kind of an in-between setup. If I were doing huge air, I'd probably go on inner holes, do a little bit different tuning, but I wanted something that can kind of drive all around on flat ground, on big jumps, that kind of thing. So that's what I would recommend on the rear shock. So yeah, Max V2 rear blue springs, Sledge white front springs. I think the next area to address is actually the steering. So once you got the suspension set up, it actually at least will kind of jump and land somewhat decently, handle somewhat decently on the ground. But the steering is another area that I felt is pretty poor on this. It has nothing to do with rollovers or whatever. I'm just talking about actual maneuverability, turning front wheels. Stock servo I think is pretty poor, so I did get a hot racing adapter. I do recommend the aluminum hot racing one over the plastic Traxxas version. So that adapter is a little bit more expensive. I think it's like 20 bucks or something. The Traxxas version is plastic. It's only like $6 or so, $8, somewhere around there. But it just has too much flex, and the aluminum definitely adds stiffness. It will give you a little bit more precision. Servo, grab whatever servo you want to run. I'm actually running a Hobby Star 4717 servo. Servo horn, you will need something fairly short to clear this upper brace. and you don't want something that pushes the servo horn way too forward. So what you really want is kind of a short height servo, something that doesn't stick out super far, and then you want a fairly short servo horn to mount to your steering rack. That'll just give you at least reasonable speed. The stock servo I think is like 0.20 or 0.19 degrees per or seconds per 60 degrees. This one I think is around 0.14 or so. That would be kind of the slowest I would recommend, just a reasonable speed. And then the other thing I did was the servo saver is super soft. The reason for that is because the stock servo is not particularly strong. So what I did was actually put little snap rings here on the servo saver, one above the spring, one below the spring. I don't know the exact size of this snap ring, and I did actually have to cut off the little ears or tabs here on the corner just to make a nice little circle. You do need something fairly thin like that. I think it's something like 12.5 or 13 millimeters outer diameter, inner diameter. I'm not sure. You need, putting one above the spring, one below the spring makes it a little bit stiffer. Pretty easy to get at. You actually just remove this top brace and get at that servo saver. So not too hard to do, but yeah, you just need a little bit stiffer servo saver. I'm not a big fan of the aluminum bell cranks because you really want plastic rubbing against plastic on the servo saver, so that can give relatively reasonably. You don't want super hard aluminum on aluminum because then they just kind of bind up a little bit. But anyways, that's what I'm running on the steering side. That will help a bit. Just to actually get you to be able to maneuver the car reasonably. And that's one of the areas that makes it hard to drive. The reaction time of this truck is fairly slow on the steering, so it's hard to overcorrect or even correct for the rear ends kicking out or sliding around. The faster servo you have with some decent torque, you'll actually be able to, nicely adjust. I don't run TSM or anything like that. I know some people do. I'm just not a fan of TSM, especially on a four-wheel drive vehicle on loose dirt. I think with decent electronics, you don't need to have that aid, and TSM actually does weird things in the air and also does not allow you to actually make the sharp corners when you do want to kick out the rear or oversteer, that kind of thing. So that would be the next change. The other area that I think will make a big difference, and you'll see a theme here, as we start changing out the electronics. So the servo I think is the weakest part of the electronics. Second thing I would say is actually the radio receiver. So you pick whatever radio you want. I've got, probably 20, 30 videos on radios. What I'm personally running is a FlySky Noble NB4 Plus. Fantastic radio, $300, but obviously you don't need to spend that amount of money. But I am running that with this receiver, FS, I think RG4R, something like that. Just a great radio, works well outdoors, very fast. You can run it at like 300 hertz, so you get very short latency and very high frame rates with these servos that are digital and can handle that. And you'll notice a huge improvement actually in just the control of this truck once you have a decent radio with some decent speed, and then also a lot more precision. There's also some steering issues with the stock radio that this will address and fix. So after that, I think you've got something that actually you'll be able to respond to what the truck is doing, correct things in the air. It'll actually jump and land reasonably well. Next area, as you can see, is I did change out the ESC. So the stock ESC, not a fan of that. The powers, it's almost like it's got like a low punch setting, but you can't actually adjust anything. I'm running a Team Corelli Toro X185, one of the best RTR ESCs you can get out there. I got mine super cheap, but pick whatever ESC you want, whatever 6S thing, Hobbywing Max 8, anything like that will be fine. Spectrum Firma V2, I think will work fine as well. But that'll just give you tunability on the truck. You can actually increase the brakes way more than you would ever need. On pavement, I'm sure the brakes is fine, but on dirt, it is low, and then especially in the air, you really can't correct the forward flipping very well with the stock ESC. And something I think you'll also notice is a lot of people Thunder RC, Ready Set RC, myself, jumping through the air, sometimes the ESC cuts out, and the reason for that is the motor and ESC combination has to, it's getting feedback from the motor. It doesn't have sensor wires or anything like that, but it is monitoring the feedback from the motor, trying to figure out whether it's going forward or backwards. And the stock ESC is very conservative in the forward to reverse correction. So a lot of times it gets confused on whether the motor is going forward or backwards. So when you're going from acceleration or throttle on power throttle, and then you brake, and then you try to go reverse to do a little air correction, it'll actually sometimes cut out, and you'll see people just nose plant into the ground. I think the RC dropped it from like 20, 30 feet high straight in the ground. Good thing this thing is durable, but yeah, that cutout issue is really because the stock ESD has trouble figuring out which way the motor is spinning, and so as a result, it's very conservative. It forces you to go into neutral for a second before it decides, okay, we can start changing directions, and that is why, yeah, one of the issues I don't like about the stock ESC. Finally, it doesn't have an on-off button, which is super annoying. Not a fan of that. So stock ESC, I think it's okay. You know, it's not the worst thing out there. Well, it is the worst thing, but it is usable. But this will give you just more air control, and you won't have those issues about it cutting out, and so I think that'll fix it. Certainly worth doing. Last thing to do is actually pick up some different tires. So stock tires are these, you know, I don't know what these are called, these belted, very hard compound tires. I'm actually running some J-Concepts, what are these called, landmines. So they are made for the UDR, and there are different offsets, different versions of these tires. There are some for the Mojave, which you do not want to get to because the offset is actually too narrow. So that would bring the tires in. So these are quite a bit skinnier than the stock tires. You know, I'd say a good, you know, quarter, 3/8 inch, something like that. So they do narrow the truck a little bit, but they have way more traction in dirt. These knobbies work a lot better. They do balloon, so on success, this will definitely hit the body if you're, you know, launching it in the air, spinning these things. So a little bit more of a 4S type tire. So I'm kind of you know, back and forth between which one I actually like better on 6S. This one will hold up a little bit better, especially and not rub the body. This one gives you more traction, but yeah, in the air you go, definitely hit the body. So it's up to you. One thing to know about this is that if you are running aluminum stub axles like you see here, you will have to drill out the center hole. So the center hole, I think it's meant for 12 millimeters with these stub axles, but out of the box I think they're like 8 or something. No, I think it's 10. I don't remember. Yeah, if you actually want to mount these up to aluminum stub axles, you would have to drill out the hole. And then also these 6 bolts holding them on. It comes with cap head screws, and they stick out so far that you can't actually get the 17 millimeter nut on the axle, so you would actually have to switch to button heads like I am doing. Up to you whether you want to do that. Probably not worth it, but you know, if you want to standardize on 17 millimeter nuts on all your 6S vehicles, that's what I did, and that's something you can do. Last thing modification you'll see is that I actually I'm running the aluminum stub axles. Work fine with the stock tires because they do have that little adapter that you can remove, but on you know, other UDR style tires, they really don't fit. Last thing I want to talk about is actually the pinion gear. So you may have seen in my video or other videos where you hear that high-pitched whining noise. Reason for that is actually because the stock pinion gear is a 25 tooth. It barely fits within this space, and there's actually a little bit of play even with the pin system to set your mesh. So what was happening is with that pinion gear actually had moved a tiny bit, and we're talking like 1/10 of a millimeter. So it was actually rubbing the side of this little gear cover, and so it was making that high-pitched whining noise. It didn't really affect the vehicle, but it was super annoying. So something you may want to do is go down to a 24 tooth pinion. I actually scooted it in one spot, so I didn't even go with the stock pinion. I moved it in one spot, I think for a 24 tooth. It still gave me barely enough mesh, but that will actually move it away from the side. So if you're running into that issue, I think JTRC or somebody was also running into that issue. That is the cause, so I didn't talk about that before, but thought I would share that if you hear that whining noise. Last thing I did was actually go with the HR Racing battery strap. So again, not a big fan of the stock battery strap. I guess it works with 2 3S packs, but all my vehicles I always run single pack. Traxxas doesn't make a 6S pack, so I'm running my own 6S pack, and that will just allow you to fit any size battery that you will want. So I think that pretty much covers everything I did to my Traxxas Maxx Slash. I wouldn't say this is like the most awesome handling vehicle. Like I said in the review, it goes from kind of a 1-star rating up to a 3-star rating. Last thing I will do is definitely try the sway bars once they are available from Traxxas. I think that will help. It may even allow you to run the inner holes on the rear end with those shock, the shock extenders or whatever you want to call them, with those sway bars. It'll kind of get you then the high jumping performance you want, as well as some decent on flat ground performance as well. So yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe, and the add notifications button if you enjoyed this video. And the last thing I would ask is, if you share this information, you know, I do appreciate if you actually posted the link rather than just, you know, copy everything I did and just tell other people. You know, that just kind of helps out the channel, so I would appreciate that. But thanks for watching, and don't forget to look for more videos soon. Bye now.